And it just kind of feels broken all the time, even though it's not. And it's just part of the charm.
Does it keep good time?
It doesn't.
No.
Well, it's old.
It's all about the sentiment.
It's all about it.
I am super excited about this one. I'm going to start with actually my first watch, the watch that got me into watches. This is my grandfather's Omega Seamaster DeVille. This just super sterile dial, kind of a 50s, late 50s, early 60s design in general. 14 karat gold filled. His name's engraved on the back.
That's awesome.
I got this watch for my 18th birthday. Graduating from high school, of course, my dad gave it to me. I'd had it in a safe for years. It was on a brown, and I'm talking a horrible color brown, NATO strap.
Big in the day.
I wound it up, and it started ticking away, and I wore this probably for, 3 years straight as my only watch, and that is the watch that brought me here today, ultimately.
It's awesome. And again, back in the day, Omega was the kind of ultimate dress watch for sure. And super popular. I think it's awesome that you got it for your 18th birthday because, I got my first watch for my 16th birthday, and I think it was kind of a traditional thing.
Yeah.
And still something I'm doing with my kids for their 18th birthday. They're getting a watch. Some of them love it, some of them don't. But at the end of the day, it's something that connects you, I think, with.
It's awesome. And I recently actually got my grandfather's grandfather clock, who actually belonged to his father. So it has my great-grandfather's name inscribed, my grandfather's name inscribed, which matches that watch. And I'm thinking about getting my name, although I have to be a good enough guy to do it.
No, I think the generational thing is an amazing connection. And I know we'll get into it when I get into mine, but that passing them down watches is something that to me is very cool because it becomes part of who you are and your family.
And something like that, it's completely timeless. Sure, it's a bumper automatic, a really out-of-date automatic movement, but it kind of adds to the charm a little bit. You feel the bumper, quote-unquote, rotor, or counterweight, as it would have been called. I actually opened the case back, and the last time it was serviced was in June of 1962.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, the fact that it's running at all,
is
I'm
amazing.
Thrilled.
That's impressive.
It gains about 5 minutes a day.
So watches existed in your family? Are there a lot of watches in your family?
No, only that one grandfather, and I think I share a lot in common with him. He was a musician also, but that's pretty much the only one.
Well, again, back then, you really only had one good watch. I mean, it wasn't like today where guys have
collecting is a
collections.
new idea.
Totally new thing. You usually had one watch. And that was it. But my dad was a watchmaker.
You were utilitarian. You were actually using
it practical every day.
Look at your cell phone, pop
exactly.
on your iPhone.
No. And it wasn't thought. It was thought of as something that was an instrument that you kind of needed. You didn't have the phone in your phone in your pocket. You didn't have the time in your pocket.
Yeah, you had to have a watch.
You had to have a reliable timepiece.
It's also cool to think about. I mean, you probably wore it every single day.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
And whereas you have pieces you love, pieces you don't love, but you're turning them on and turning them off. I mean, your family was probably wearing it every single day.
Which is, one of the cooler things to me. I mean, and just little hints, just the numerals, the applied markers on the dial, the fading of the dial, the eyelash that's under the crystal. I mean,
it has character.
It's got character.
That's the most important thing. That's awesome.
And couldn't be more different than the other watch that I brought, which is This is my go everywhere beater. This is a Seiko Orange Monster, and I have it on.
Very subtle.
Yeah, very subtle. Obnoxious, bright orange NATO. I love this.
Looks good with that blonde hair.
Looks great with matches.
He's definitely got more platinum lately.
Yeah, I'm trying to be like you, Lainey. This is just ultimate utilitarian. I beat it to death. There's a little bit of rust on it, but it goes with me everywhere. Whenever I go somewhere for a few days that I expect to get even close to water, I bring that watch with me. If my date just isn't on the wrist, it's that.
No, it's awesome. It's a cool piece, actually. I haven't seen it in orange, but I love it. I have a bright yellow dial Breitling, so I can relate slightly.
It'll be interesting to watch that get passed down through generations. Years and years from now, somebody's rocking that orange dial.
Grandfather wore this?
Yeah, this is my grandfather's watch, exactly. Timeless.
This duo belonged to my grandfather.
Yeah.
Cool. He was an odd die. All right, Alaina, what do you got for us?
All right. So I have two very classic watches here. One has already been passed down to me, and one day will hopefully be mine, but no time soon. So this is just a classic Cartier tank. It was my mom's. My dad bought it for her probably late 20s. And a couple months ago, I had said to my mom, like, I really want a Cartier tank. You know, I want something classic, something that I can wear every day. I'm not comfortable wearing a bracelet watch, so I was like, I want a strap watch. She was like, oh, I have something. And my mom, interestingly, both my parents really like watches. My whole family likes watches. My uncle used to collect watches. He collected erotica, I think I talked about this, erotica pieces, and had a really big collection.
Now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
You had to take
So their watches are all in my family. This piece honestly needs some work. It is not running well, and if you look close, the buckle's falling
Ready to
off.
fall off?
So it's going to go into Cartier for service, but my mom just gave it to me like right before quarantine. I love it. I know she wore it, and she's kind of upgraded over the years, as many people have, into different watches, so it just doesn't get worn. But I love the idea that, you know, it came from my dad. It was given to my mom with love. And she said she just remembers wanting that watch so badly.
Well, these were like the pop.
So
I mean, this
cool.
was the thing back in the.
So my dad went to New York, and he got it for her. And yeah, now it's mine. Hopefully my sister isn't jealous, but
I'm sure she will be,
I'm
because it's
pretty
classic.
excited.
I mean,
Yeah,
you can't
classic,
miss with
beautiful.
A, Cartier tank, white dial,
Yeah,
sapphire crown.
I
I mean, it's everything you want.
I view the tank as one of the classic ladies' pieces, without a doubt. Probably more so than pretty much anything, to be honest with you. It's just one of those absolute style icons that hasn't changed a ton through the years, and really shouldn't.
Yeah, and you know what? I like that it's small. You talk about classic and passing it on from generations to generations, and you know, I think just think about passing down. I mean, your orange strap for one, but you know, one of the huge Zenith Pilot watches that came out years ago, and passing that down, and in 5 generations, what that will look like. I don't think that piece will ever go out of style, and I hope one day to pass it down. But I love that piece, and very grateful that my mom gifted it to me and not my sister.
That's awesome.
The second piece is like I said, it's not yet mine, but I feel like, you know, this sub is the first thing that got me into watches, that I ever really noticed about watches. My dad is a dentist, and when he became a dentist, he bought himself this piece. I was just telling you guys that he bought it for like $350 or something like that.
He did well.
He did well. He kicks himself all day long for not buying more of them. But I mean, he wears this. You can see it's pretty beat up. He wears.
It's beautifully beat
It's
up.
amazing.
Yeah, he wears this watch every single day. The bracelet is, going the crystal. It's got that acrylic crystal, which is super cool.
Yep.
Yeah. And he loves it. He wears it. He's one time serviced it, and then he learned that he shouldn't really, service or replace parts. But
I have to say, when I go to the dentist, I want my dentist
Just
to
to
be
be
wearing a
wearing that?
1680.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, it's the most iconic watch
I
there is.
feel
I mean,
like
you talk
it's
about
a-
iconic watches.
I feel like it's a
Seriously.
very doctor watch. Like my uncle, also a doctor, wears sub. My cousin wears.
Well,
sub.
I mean, again, it was the ultimate tool watch
Yeah.
back then. But again, it wasn't crazy. I mean, $350 was a lot of money then, I'm sure, but not compared to what they are today. But
Yeah.
And
It's
you
just
mentioned
something
doctor's
that's last.
watches. You're scrubbing in, you're scrubbing out, lots of hand washing. What better than a Rolex?
no, that's the only thing you should
Exactly.
be wearing, really, because this will go through anything. And it looks like it has, which
It
is
really
awesome.
does.
See, I love that part because I beat the crap out of my Rolexes,
Yeah,
and I'm
super
the same way.
iconic, and you know what? Again, it's just to me, it's sort of the base.
It's even better like that.
It
isn't
really
it?
does.
It's the base for what I compare all watches to. You know, when I'm talking to a client or something about a watch, everything gets compared to a sub for me, and I think that's because, again, it was sort of the first watch that was ever around me and I was used to seeing, and it's also a pretty standard.
And it's also becomes part of your
Utilitarian
dad
as
because
well,
it's what
yeah.
you wear every day. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how certainly I got into watches.
It's great
There's
too
nothing
because
better.
you can see that this has been polished once or twice, but it's mostly been polished by the wear that it's been, that it's been given. You know, all the edges are there, all the chamfers are there. It's not overdone, and just the decades of wearing has done it for him, and that's so cool.
Yeah, and he also, I think he still has the original box of papers on it.
Oh my
that's
God,
super
that's
cool.
Yeah, we have the original box of papers on the Cartier as well. My parents,
Keep
luckily were
everything.
smart. Yeah, they sure do.
I love that. All right, so we'll roll into mine. So my first one, again, both of them. This first one was my dad's watch, and my dad was a watchmaker, so there was always watches involved in my house, and he had a lot. This is the one I remember him wearing the most, especially when I was a kid. I just remember when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, sitting at the table every night because that's what we did. And we always didn't get along, but I remember just like staring at that big, obnoxious.
Huge for the
And that
time.
was probably, really large.
Yeah, I mean, this was a Movado Zenith. Exactly.
It's the same size.
It was one of the original El Primero movements. Just a watchmaker's watch. I mean, it was the coolest automatic chronograph.
5 hertz movement. I mean, the whole
Exactly,
nine.
the whole 9 yards. You know, big crystal, big bezel. Obviously, he wore it a lot. Knowing him, he brought it in pieces and fixed it up.
Is the bracelet original?
No, the bracelet is not original. It's an aftermarket bracelet that he had
Funky.
on it.
It's
Totally
super funky.
It's
So
totally
70s.
Yeah. And again, I remember so many cool 70s Movados and Omegas. That was kind of his thing.
Yeah.
But I also remember when I got it, I mean, he passed about, it's 10, 11 years ago. And it's the only things I really cared about having because it reminds me of my dad.
It's so him.
And it's only because in the last 6 months we started doing some of this stuff that I actually dug it out and I wear it regularly now, which is kind of cool.
That is cool.
Because it does remind me of my dad, and it was just one of those things that, you know, there was always times, you know, growing up that things weren't always great. You know, I was the only son, so, you know, it was bumpy at times, but we always talked watches, we always loved watches, and it was just
Common ground.
common ground. It's the thing I remember him kind of the most of, just like, because it was always part of who he was. And I think that's the cool thing with watches in general is like, I'm assuming my kids will always think of me as, you know, wearing a big Rolex.
Without a doubt.
I, without a doubt, will always picture my dad in that watch.
Right, exactly.
Without a
and
doubt.
there's just some of that connection of, you know, who they are and what's part of who they are.
My mom too. My mom wears like a little gold ladies president, and it's, you know, little and not what women wear now, but it's just what I will always envision my mother wearing that watch.
Right, and it's just, there's connection. So the second one I bought was actually my first Rolex, and it was just kind of a cool story. Obviously, I started selling Rolexes.
Your first?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, this was my first Rolex. It was I started selling Rolex in 1983 as a kid, college kid. And then back in, I want to say it was 89 or 90. Yeah, you'll see some cool engraving. Rolex had something that's called the Crown Club. So
I've read about this.
If you sold a certain number of Rolexes, you would get a Rolex. Now I'm, 25, 26 years old. I wasn't buying myself a Rolex at the time. So I parked my butt behind the counter.
Hustled your way to your free Rolex.
Hustled my way to my free Rolex.
Imagine how easy it would be to get a Rolex nowadays if you were sitting behind the counter.
Exactly.
Just open the door, yeah.
Yep, it was just the way it was, but you really had to work for it back then. And they only ran it for about 2 years.
That is
and you can
so
see it's
cool.
got the, they engraved it with your name and the big Rolex crown, and it is one I will never get rid of.
That is so cool. The other cool thing is, it's obviously nice to have watches passed down to you, but it's also kind of cool to have a watch that commemorates something special or hard work you put in.
I feel like
you're gonna look at that and be like, I grinded it out and I got that watch, and yeah.
Because selling Rolexes back then was not as easy as it is today.
So how many pieces did you sell for something like this?
I don't even know what the program was, but it was a lot. I mean, you had to really go at it for a while. But
the engraving on it's awesome.
The engraving is
really
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, and obviously I've worn it to death, so I wore it for a lot of years before I started picking up a couple other Rolexes, but I tend to hang on to most of mine.
Do you still wear it?
I do occasionally. My son tends to wear it more than I do because,
Your kids are lucky. They have a pretty nice collection.
They have a
to
pretty
choose
nice
from.
collection, and they do tend to, Mitchell, my especially, goes and steals some of that stuff.
I think
But I
this
love
is
the dial fade on that one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the early pieces.
I think
before
this
the
is the
gold
first
buckle.
first Crown Club piece I've seen in person, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A lot of watches tend to commemorate occasions, or at least in my family or even here, is that, people buy them for themselves, mark an occasion, a wedding, the anniversary, 18th
My first watch
birthday.
was when I got my job here.
Was it really?
Yep. Well, I had to have a watch because I worked here, but I also had just graduated from college and bought a Datejust. I will never, everybody's like, trade it in, you bought it so well. Never will I ever trade that watch in.
Yeah, no, I'm bad like that too. I don't really get rid of many watches. I mean, I have, especially if something was gifted to me, I would never get rid of it. And I think, I never understand that, people who are like, oh, I bought it, but it's like, I get emotional about the damn thing.
I do
don't
too.
understand.
I agree.